The road looked quiet that morning, the kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl if you've lived through war long enough. Mist hung low over the trees, birds stayed silent, and the dirt track stretched forward like nothing could ever happen there. Then the engines came. 3 German motorcycles, fast and loud, cutting through the calm as if they owned the land beneath their tires. They didn't slow down. They didn't look around. They laughed, because this road had been checked before, and because the man waiting in the trees had been laughed at too. He lay flat in the mud, fingers tight around a simple rope, heart pounding so hard it felt like the ground could hear it. This wasn't a gun. This wasn't a bomb. It was a rope tied between 2 trees, stretched low and pulled tight, and everyone told him it would never work. In 8 seconds, that idea would disappear. The Germans had reason to feel confident as they rode deeper into occupied territory, because by 1941 their motorized patrols moved fast, hit hard, and crushed resistance groups before they could even react. Motorcycles gave them speed, freedom, and fear, and many partisans learned the hard way that standing against them usually meant death. The man with the rope knew this better than anyone. He wasn't a trained soldier, wasn't even supposed to be fighting, but the war had taken his home, his family, and his choices. This was all he had left. His village had been quiet once, the kind of place where people knew each other's names and shared bread during hard winters. Then the occupation came, bringing uniforms, orders, and the constant hum of engines that announced control. He'd watched neighbors disappear, seen buildings marked for confiscation, heard screams that nobody could answer. The war didn't ask permission to destroy everything he knew. It just did. Quick thing before we continue, hit subscribe if you want more incredible World War II stories like this. Because we share moments you won't hear about in textbooks, and this one only gets more unbelievable from here. What those German riders didn't know was that the simplest ideas can be the deadliest, especially when someone has nothing left to lose and 8 seconds to change everything. German patrols ruled the countryside in occupied Europe, especially in rural areas where resistance fighters hid among farms and forests. Motorcycles became a symbol of control, because they could scout roads, carry messages, and strike villages before anyone had time to warn the next town. The riders felt untouchable, riding with helmets loose, rifles slung casually, laughing as they passed broken fences and burned homes. They'd mocked traps before, wires, pits, fake roadblocks, because most failed and got people killed. Experience taught them to fear bombs and guns, not ropes. These patrols weren't just passing through. They were the eyes and ears of occupation, reporting back on movement, supplies, and suspicious activity. A single patrol could bring down an entire resistance cell, turning whispered names into arrest warrants before sunrise. The fear they created was intentional, designed to make people feel watched even when no one was there. The problem for the resistance was simple and brutal. They lacked weapons, had little ammo, and couldn't afford open fights, because the Germans would answer with executions and fire. Every attack had to be fast, silent, and confusing, and it had to leave no trace that led back to civilians. This forced people to think differently, using farm tools, scrap metal, and ideas that sounded foolish until they worked. That's where the rope came in. The man waiting by the road had watched German motorcycles for weeks, studying how fast they rode and how close they followed each other. He noticed something important. They didn't slow down on straight roads, and they trusted speed to keep them safe. So he tied a thick rope between 2 trees, low enough to catch a rider at chest height, but high enough to miss the front wheel. It looked ridiculous. Even his own group laughed. One man shook his head and said it would never stop them. Another said it would just get someone killed. He spent nights testing the tension, making sure the rope wouldn't snap but wouldn't be visible either. The trees had to be strong enough to hold under impact, positioned close enough to the road but far enough back to avoid suspicion. Every detail mattered, because one mistake meant discovery, and discovery meant reprisal against everyone nearby. The morning of the ambush, he arrived before dawn, checking the rope 3 times, his hands numb from cold and nerves. He heard the engines before he saw them, that unmistakable growl that meant Germans were coming, and his stomach twisted with doubt. What if the rope broke? What if they saw it? What if this whole idea was as stupid as everyone said? The first motorcycle hit the rope at full speed. There was no warning, no time to react, just a sharp snap as the rope went tight and the rider flew backward. Body lifted clean off the bike like a doll tossed by a child. The second rider had half a second to see something was wrong. Not enough. He slammed into the fallen bike, lost control, and flipped hard into the dirt. The third rider tried to brake. Too late. He hit the rope, the bikes, the bodies, and everything turned into noise, dust, and screaming metal. 8 seconds. 3 motorcycles. Silence. The forest seemed to hold its breath as the engines died, smoke curling into the air while birds finally took flight. The man dropped the rope and ran, because staying meant death, but he couldn't stop shaking as he moved. It worked. The thing they mocked had stopped them cold. For the first time in months, he felt something close to hope. Stories like this spread fast, even without words. German patrols started slowing down on quiet roads, scanning tree lines, their confidence cracked by the idea that danger didn't always come from guns. The resistance learned something too. They learned that creativity mattered more than firepower, and that understanding your enemy could turn weakness into strength. One rope didn't win the war, but it saved lives, bought time, and reminded people they weren't helpless. Word traveled through underground networks, passed between safe houses and whispered in markets. Other groups tried similar tactics, adapting the idea to their own terrain and situations. Some used chains, others tested different heights and locations, each experiment teaching something new about how to fight without traditional weapons. Captured German reports later complained about road traps that used almost no supplies but caused delays and fear far out of proportion to their size. Commanders hated them because they couldn't bomb a rope or arrest an idea. Every delay meant less control, and less control meant more space for resistance to breathe and grow. For the man who built the trap, there was no medal, no parade, and no name recorded in official history. He went back to hiding, back to hunger and fear, but he carried the knowledge that for one brief moment, he'd outsmarted an army that claimed to be unbeatable. That matters more than we often realize, especially in a war built on breaking spirits. When the war finally ended, roads filled with vehicles again. But people remembered the quiet ones best, the ones where nothing seemed wrong until it was. That's how control really breaks, not always with loud battles, but with small shocks that force powerful men to look over their shoulders. What happened on that road was happening all across occupied Europe, as ordinary people used simple tools to fight a modern army, proving that power doesn't always belong to the side with the most machines. Sometimes it belongs to the person willing to think differently and act when everyone else says it's pointless. By the end of the war, German forces lost thousands of vehicles to resistance actions, many caused by traps so basic they sounded absurd on paper. Speed became fear. Confidence became caution. Control slipped away one road at a time. Thanks for watching. Quick disclaimer. This story is for entertainment purposes only, accuracy not verified. Do your own research. If you want more true World War II stories like this, subscribe now. Next time, we're diving into another moment where luck met courage and improvisation changed everything.